I'm joined in the studio now by Perrin Beatty. He's president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Beatty, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with what we've seen, the most visible manifestation we've seen over the past few days, and that is this incredible drop in volatility in the stock market. What do you make of that? Because there's the stock market and then there's the rest of the economy. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the most important thing is that we saw a change in the nature of the disease itself. It appears as if it isn't containable behind national boundaries. Mm-hmm. And when we're seeing person-to-person transmission within a country as opposed to somebody bringing it in from outside, that means that the disease has progressed to a different stage. That meant that the financial community around the world looked at that and said, we're dealing with something on a completely different order of magnitude. Okay. And they started to have an adjustment in the stock market as a result.
The stock market, for the most part, reflects anticipated profits and anticipated business. So the stock market, this is people with money in the markets anticipating a longer term effect. What about the Canadian economy in general? Where are we vulnerable?
Well, we're seeing the first effects already. If you're in the tourism sector, you're seeing that groups that you might have expected to have in from Asia, particularly from China, aren't coming at this point. The same if you're a travel agent and you're booking people outgoing to Italy, for example, you'll find that sales are off there significantly. If you're a convention planner for any time this year, what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be trying to assemble large groups of people either in the spring or the fall? So that's a start. But other elements of business, if you require inputs from China or from other countries that have been hit, such as South Korea, are you confident of your supply chain? Mm-hmm. And will this have a consequence here that you have to shut your business because you can't get the inputs that you need? What about market sales that you're making? China's share of the global GDP is twice what it was at the time of SARS. And this means then that a slowdown in China will have twice the effect that it had back then.
Speaking about SARS in 2003, the biggest impact we found in Canada was largely tourism and travel, visitors coming and travel in general. This, you mentioned because of supply chains, because of inputs, because of manufacturing, much more dependent. What about markets? I was down in Eastern Canada during the election, and it seemed that all the growth in, for example, in seafood products was the Asian market.
And that's a major concern. Supply chains are being disrupted. Markets themselves are being disrupted, and it is going to spill through all aspects of Canadian economy, of Canada's economy, if this goes on for a long time. There's good news and bad news comparing to SARS. It appears to be less deadly than SARS, but it appears to be more readily spreadable, and it appears to be more long-lasting than SARS. Mm. As a consequence, then, as businesses do their planning, we simply don't know at this point whether, when warmer weather comes in the spring, we'll see it dying down. We don't know whether it's going to be coming back in the fall. We don't know whether this will be a chronic problem that will come back year after year in the same way as influenza does.
Is there a group of businesses that is more susceptible, more vulnerable in Canada? I mean, for example, the big corporations or the smaller SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises?
As a result of SARS, if you can say there's any good news that came out of the fact that Canada, and particularly Toronto, were at the epicenter of the concern over SARS, it is that this was a laboratory for us for pandemics yet to come. Okay. And it means that our public health authorities are better prepared than ever before. They handled it, I think, exceptionally well with something that was just out of the blue. We can handle this better as a result of that experience. Larger businesses now have contingency plans in place and are ready to deal with this. Where my concern is that 90% plus of the businesses in Canada are SMEs. Mm. And when you're in an SME, you're so busy dealing with the day-to-day issues that are coming in that you often don't get the opportunity to look out over the horizon and to plan. We urgently need help for our SMEs to give them the information they need to prepare themselves. Simple questions. If 20 to 40% of your workforce were unable to come into work, how could you keep your doors open? Is it possible for your employees to telecommute, something that wasn't as possible during the SARS breakout? Do you have a line of credit at the bank? If you had to close your doors for 2 or 3 weeks, could you reopen them? Do you have that credit at the bank to be able to restart? What about your suppliers? Do you know whether all of your suppliers have themselves business continuity plans that ensures that you can get your hands on the inputs that are necessary.
What are you seeing? Because we're seeing very varied estimates of the potential for the drop in gross domestic product in the economy, in economic output, both of Canada and the world economy, and estimates for China. What are you seeing? I mean, what kind of ballpark are we seeing?
Bottom line is we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how serious this is. It's different from any other recent pandemic that we've had. It's on the verge of being declared a pandemic. We don't know. And so what this means then is that we have to take prudent steps. It means not panic, but preparation.
On the macroeconomic level, we saw the Chinese central bank, or the Chinese government, inject billions and billions of dollars into their economy to try and stimulate and try and offset some of the slowing down of their economy. There's talk that there could be a concerted effort. I saw a quote from a former chair, or a deputy chair of the Fed, the American Fed, saying that there could be a plan hatched, like there was in 2008, faced with the global recession in 2008, a sort of a stabilization plan, but it would have to be organized between a lot of the industrialized countries. Is that something that you think that is being talked about?
I believe we are going to be seeing that. When we looked at the 2008 crisis, it was when the meeting was convened in Washington and governments came together that there was some coherence in terms of trying to get the financial system back on track. When you're dealing with a virus like this, a physical virus as well as an economic virus, it's important to have concerted global action. So I would be very surprised if we did not see that. And we need to see it sooner as opposed to later.
Something just coming into my head, the last time I had you sitting here in front of me, we were talking about Donald Trump and his particular views on the economy. He's not a multilateralist. Do you think compared to 2008 in Washington and Pittsburgh and those meetings, we might have more difficult getting concerted international efforts?
It was worrisome where he in essence dismissed the issue just a couple of days ago, where he said, well, we have it under control, nothing to worry about, it will disappear magically with warmer weather in April. Well, he may be a much better scientist than the people at the Centers for Disease Control. Nobody can say with any certainty at this point. So we need to take prudent measures to prepare, and we need to coordinate what we're doing. The other challenge that we have compared to 2008 is that interest rates are already at record low levels. There's not the same flexibility that governments had at that time to cut interest rates to stimulate the economy. And here in Canada, prior to 2008, all of our senior levels of government had their books in balance. We don't have the same fiscal flexibility now.
As a last question then, briefly, you mentioned government. We're anticipating in several weeks a federal budget possibly. Any advice on whether you think the federal government might want to think twice before having a budget to try and get the better lay of the land in terms of the economic impact of this?
I don't know that delaying the budget would be the best course, but the message certainly I would have for the government is you need to concentrate on fundamentals. After we saw a final quarter last year that was below expectations, after the blockades, with the coronavirus coming at us, after the tech decision which will affect investment in Canada, we have a fire in the kitchen. You don't spend your time worrying about redecorating the living room. Focus on the fundamentals.
Okay. Perrin, Beatty, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.